distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and warm welcome. Ayubowan. On behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore, it gives us great pleasure to have you all with us at the ISAS Colombo Colloquium. Without further ado, it gives me great honor to invite the Honorable Minister for External Affairs of Sri Lanka, Professor Piris, who's also the chairman of the Lakshmana Kadirgama Institute for International Relations and Strategic Studies, to deliver his opening remarks. Minister, sir, please.
The Honorable K. Shanmugam, the distinguished Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister for Law of the Republic of Singapore, Your Excellencies, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Professor Yong, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome my distinguished colleague to our shores on this occasion. Minister Shanmugam has been referred to with every justification as a titan in the legal field in Singapore. He was one of the most illustrious lawyers in Singapore before he was persuaded by the government of Singapore to accept the portfolio of Foreign Affairs. He was previously Minister for Law. His visit to our country on this occasion is all too brief, but it is exceedingly productive. I think we have identified the priorities with precision, and there are several aspects of his visit and the activities that he will undertake during his visit, to which I would like to make brief reference. On this occasion, we are launching the Encyclopedia of the Diaspora. I think that is a very timely initiative. We have had deep bonds which go back a long time between Singapore and Sri Lanka, and many of Singapore's prominent personalities in government, in academia, in business, in all walks of life, have their roots in my country. The Honorable Dharman Shanmugaratnam, Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, who also holds the portfolio of finance and is, I believe, the chairman of the Regulatory Authority of Singapore, told me that he remembers that his grandfather had a house in Ward Place. That is one of the locations within the city of Colombo. His family also had a house in Jaffna. I am myself familiar with many personalities from Singapore who have very close relations with our country. So the role of the diaspora is certainly worth focusing on, because it straddles a diversity of areas. And the book itself is in two parts. It is by no means confined to the Sri Lankan diaspora in Singapore. It covers a much broader area. When you come to think of it, the contribution made by Sri Lankans all over the world is truly amazing. During the time that I spent as SMUTS visiting fellow in Commonwealth Studies in the University of Cambridge, there was a very distinguished Sri Lankan, Vis Navaratnam, whom I believe you know. He was one of the most respected members of the medical faculty of the University of Cambridge. We have the Ondachis in Canada. We have people like Sir Desmond de Silva, Queen's Counsel in the United Kingdom. When I was a student at Oxford University, Dhruvi de Seram and Rohan de Seram were making a contribution that was universally acknowledged in the field of music. So you name it, in any field whatsoever, Sri Lankans have distinguished themselves all over the world. They have made an indelible impression on the life of many countries. It's not altogether surprising because of the quality of our educational system in this country. Many leaders whom I have had the privilege of meeting in recent months have told me that Sri Lankan teachers have been singularly successful in their countries, particularly teaching science and mathematics. Presidents of countries, prime ministers of countries in Africa have said that they remember with gratitude and affection the role that was played by their teachers in molding their careers, their personalities, and instilling in them values which have defined their attitude to life and to their careers. So that is one part of the proceedings today, the launch of the encyclopedia. I also want to pay tribute to the contribution that the government of Singapore is making to the strengthening of institutions and the amelioration of living conditions in the northern province of Sri Lanka. The Honorable K. Shanmugam, my distinguished colleague, will be visiting the northern province tomorrow. And while he is there, he will be participating in many initiatives of inestimable pragmatic value. Singapore has already played a very prominent part in developing the Jaffna Library. Ambassador Gopinath Pillai has played a pioneering role in this. He was in our country some months ago, and Singapore was responsible for building again and improving the children's section of the Jaffna Library. And tomorrow, Minister Shanmugam will be initiating a series of initiatives which will entail considerable benefit for no fewer than 38 schools in the northern province. The focus will be on improving English communication skills. There will also be a vocational training institute that will be established in Jaffna. There will be a mobile library, a bus, which will serve the people of Jaffna. There will also be a youth resource center that will be established in the northern province. Now, the point I want to make is that these are very much in conformity with the clearly defined priorities of the people of the northern province. This is what they want in order to make their lives more complete, more productive, more meaningful at this critical time. The government of Sri Lanka has invested colossal resources in the development of infrastructure in the northern province. It really is a different world. Highways, railroad systems, the power and energy sector, schools and hospitals that were totally devastated are now up and running. And what we see in the northern province is nothing short of an economic renaissance. Countries which were by no means admirers of Sri Lanka were amazed at what they saw during their visit to the north, on the sidelines of the Commonwealth Summit, which was held in this country in November last year. Earlier it was doom, despondency, no light visible at the end of the tunnel. Today we have banks opening branches there, hotels coming up, and since the diaspora plays a prominent role in the proceedings this morning, it is relevant to mention that the diaspora is building an apartment block in the north, and I was informed that more than 80% of the apartments have already been paid for. So there are segments of the diaspora that are playing a very constructive role. They want to come in, do what they can to make life better for their brethren, and this is something that we deeply appreciate. And the government of Singapore is reaching out to us in a spirit of fraternity, friendship, and goodwill, complementing the efforts of the government of Sri Lanka. Minister Shanmugam will have meetings with Mr. Vigneswaran, the Chief Minister of the North. He will be meeting the governor and other officials. So it is going to be a multifaceted, a very satisfying and productive visit. The other aspect that I would like to refer to is the conclusion of the agreement that we will be signing. This is an agreement between the Lakshman Kavirkama Institute of International Relations and Strategic Studies, which we are developing as a think tank under the aegis of my ministry, and the Institute of Asian Studies, which is linked to the National University of Singapore. I might mention that in my previous academic incarnation, I have lectured in the National University of Singapore, not for long periods. There have been very distinguished Sri Lankans who have lectured there in the Faculty of Law. The late Minister Lalith Atulat Mudali served as a lecturer in the National University of Singapore. My own teacher, Professor Sonaraja, who taught me here, occupied a chair of law in the National University of Singapore. And I have myself spoken at the invitation of Ambassador Gopinath Pillai at this institute on more than one occasion. And we are therefore very happy that this memorandum of understanding is being signed today by Professor Yong and Mr. Asanga Abegunasekara. And we look forward to a very fruitful collaboration between these two institutes. There's already a great deal of collaboration in the field of education. The government of Singapore has made some short-term opportunities available to us during the year 2013 to 2014 in a variety of very important practical areas like tourism, like water management, the public service, tourism. We are already enjoying the benefit of this. And the Singapore International Foundation has been doing a lot in this area, and also the Raffles Educational Corporation of Singapore. So I would like to acknowledge and to express appreciation of the very substantial cooperation that is already taking place in the educational sphere between Singapore and Sri Lanka. So with these words, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your presence here this morning. Particularly, I thank the Honorable K. Shanmugam at a very busy time. He told me that within 2 hours of his return to his own country tomorrow, he has to leave for Singapore on another very important assignment. So we are very grateful that he has found time in this exceedingly busy schedule to visit us, to undertake a whole cluster of activities which are certainly going to make a very profound impact, not only on the strengthening of relations between Singapore and Sri Lanka, but these activities will be immensely beneficial to the people of our country at a critical juncture in their contemporary history. Thank you very much.
You invite the Chairman of the Institute of South Asian Studies, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, to deliver his welcome remarks. Ambassador, please.
I think you rather hear my minister. but I have to disappoint you because as chairman of the institute, I've been assigned to give this welcome address. Minister Perez, Minister Shanmugam, the High Commissioner of Singapore to Sri Lanka, my good friend Mr. Karan Singh Thakral, Director of our institute, Professor Tan Tai Yong, Executive Director of Lakshman Kadagama Institute, Mr. Abhaya Gunasegara, ladies and gentlemen. May I also add my words of welcome to this, what Professor Pires has said. Whenever I'm in Colombo, I feel as if I'm in some part of Singapore, because it is so, you feel so much at home. A Singaporean coming to Sri Lanka, coming to Colombo, feels much more at home than I would venture to say any other part of South Asia. And therefore, the potential of greater people-to-people interaction is far greater. But then you look around, and then you realize that Sri Lanka is much more generously endowed by nature than Singapore. Otherwise, there is a lot of similarity. Singapore and Sri Lanka, as Minister has said, has long relationship going back to the colonial days. Sri Lankan talent comprising of Tamils, Sinhalese, Burghers, augmented the talent pool of Singapore, including the civil service, the professions. The permanent secretary, the first permanent secretary of finance when Singapore was independent, was a Ceylon Burgher, a handsome-looking man. I still remember him. He, some years later, became my boss in Malaysia. The judiciary in Singapore used to be jokingly called the Colombo court because it's dominated by Sri Lankans. In the field of education, Professor Pires had mentioned how Sri Lankan teachers were very sought after for both mathematics and science subjects. Singapore and Sri Lanka looked as if they're poised for greater economic collaboration in the 80s. And several projects were initiated or considered. I was myself representing a Singapore government company which studied the possibility of setting up a palm oil project, including the setting up of a plantation in the Mahavili area. And I came here, had discussion with the late Mr. Kamini Desanaike, and sad that he's not here, but we had very fruitful discussion. But then things went a little different direction, and everything was held. We have other MOUs with other parts of the other institutes and other parts of the country. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me next to witness the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between the two research institutes.
Mr. K. Shanmugam, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to introduce the Encyclopedia of the Sri Lankan Diaspora, a major undertaking by the Institute of South Asian Studies. As my chairman has explained earlier, we do a range of research on South Asia. We look at India, we look at other parts of South Asia as well, and this project on the Sri Lankan diaspora is one of a very big project that we have taken, which was started about 2.5 years ago and completed at the end of last year. Now, this encyclopedia of the Sri Lankan diaspora brings together a global account of the varied nature of the Sri Lankan diaspora. The first of its kind, this richly illustrated volume is a testimony to the inspiring journeys of the emigrants from Sri Lanka who left for diverse reasons, but who brought with them social, religious, cultural identities from the island, which proved instrumental in laying the foundations for the establishment of new communities in their adopted homelands. The idea to undertake a project of this magnitude and nature was conceived by the Institute of South Asian Studies in 2010. In many ways, this book emulates the concept and structure of an earlier volume that was completed in 2006, and this was the Encyclopedia of the Indian Diaspora, then undertaken by the South Asian Studies program at the National University of Singapore. It is notable that that volume, published in 2006, continues to be the standard reference text for studies on the Indian global diaspora. Now, this volume on the Encyclopedia of the Sri Lankan Diaspora is novel in its approach of offering readers with an all-encompassing overview of the development of diasporic communities of Tamil, Sinhala, Muslim, Christian, and Burgher people from the island of Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, who ventured overseas. Estimated at about 3 million people, the Sri Lankan diaspora is made up largely of the Tamil diaspora, although the Sinhala, Muslim, and Burgher communities also comprise a significant number. An outstanding feature of the book lies in its presentation of a perspective that is representative of the pan-ethnic character of the diaspora. Now, the volume covers a vast historical trajectory spanning from the pre-colonial early development of Sri Lankan society right up to the contemporary period. Indeed, in addition to being a pioneering study, the encyclopedia is an ambitious volume that provides readers with a comprehensive analysis of the demographic, political, and rich social cultural history of both Sri Lanka and of its diaspora. Now, we assembled more than 50 scholars globally to contribute to this encyclopedia, and this is a volume that is made up of both contextual as well as country-based features that serve to illustrate the varied dimensions of the diasporic experience. The book celebrates the achievements that the Sri Lankan community has made internationally in a variety of fields, including medicine, science, academia, law, public administration, as well as in areas such as literature, culture, arts, cuisine, sports, and popular culture, among others. The Honourable Minister has mentioned some very prominent Sri Lankan diaspora members living overseas. The major part of the book consists of 21 country region profiles and covers the formation and development of Sri Lankan diasporic communities in Asia, Australasia, Europe, and North America. The book also comprises approximately 500 images, both archival as well as contemporary, and highlights a range of important maps, tables, and documents. The editorial team, led by Emeritus Professor Peter Reeves and Dr. Rajesh Rai, now Assistant Director at ISAS, must be commended for bringing this challenging volume together with finesse. The final product also benefited from an international advisory panel led by Professor Sir Arukumaran Sabaratnam. ISAS is therefore proud to present this volume, which we are confident will serve as an important reference in future works on the Sri Lankan diaspora. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Tan. It's my great pleasure now to invite Singapore's Minister for Foreign Affairs and Law, Mr. K. Shanmugam, and Sri Lanka's Minister for External Affairs, Professor J.L. Piris, together with Ambassador Pillay for the launch of the Encyclopedia of the Sri Lankan Diaspora.
The government. Of course, naturally, he became Minister of Law and also Home Affairs, and then now Minister for Foreign Affairs. Mr. Piris, Professor Piris, on the other hand, is a titan in the field of academics, and his lectures, I'm told, whether he was in Cambridge or whether he was in Singapore or anywhere, was always sought after by the students as great words of wisdom. So today you have a treat of having two titans. They are modest people, so they may not admit to being titans. Or maybe titan has got connotations which they may not like. You know, these legal brains, you've got to be very careful how you term them. But maybe I can start with the first question, and I'm sure the crowd being Sri Lankan, there will be no dearth of questions. My first question would be on bilateral relations. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, Singapore and Sri Lanka has had a very long relationship. From the time of the colonial period, the talent pool was almost always from Sri Lanka. And we have had that. Then, of course, after Singapore got its independence and Sri Lanka there was also certain convergence of views on world affairs. Neither of us were keen to join either to be part of the Cold War, but at the same time adopt a rather independent and neutral position and became quite friends. But each one took a different turn, and I think it's time for re-engagement. So may I perhaps start with Mr. Shanmugam and ask him this question, that how does he see the relationship, bilateral relationship between Sri Lanka and Singapore evolving as we go forward? And then, of course, Professor Pires can comment on it, and then we can open it up for discussion. Mr. Shanmugam.
Thanks, Ambassador. I think if you look at it, you've set out the historical context, and so has Professor Pires. If you look at it post Second World War, post the colonial period, not many people realize it, but Sri Lanka was one of the models that our founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, copied in terms of Colombo's infrastructure. If you walk around, for example, one of the basic things that we copied was having pathways, footpaths along the streets. It was copied from Colombo. And he was a great admirer of Sri Lanka and its progress, and we did many things together. We were hoping to do more things together, and histories diverged a bit, your history diverged a bit, and things were not as, between us, they didn't flower to the full potential. But if you look at it more recently, I think Professor Pires and I have met a number of times in international fora, and generally the approach that Singapore has taken vis-a-vis Sri Lanka, I think Professor Pires will understand and accept it, has been a very practical, constructive approach. We look at the issues and we say, look, this is what's facing us, this is what needs to be done, and these are the things we can do. And there is a great deal of interest in Singapore with having a closer relationship with Sri Lanka. There's a great deal of interest from the business people as well, because the business practices and the structure of the economy is a little bit more understandable for Singaporeans compared with many parts of Asia, including many parts of South Asia. For example, this week, earlier this year, I think January or February, the stock exchange had a meeting in Singapore Stock Exchange of Colombo. It was a full house, a lot of interest from Singaporeans, Singapore businesses. This week, I think Temasek, one of the Temasek entities, together with another entity is coming over here, Center for Livable Cities, I think, coming over here, because one of the things that we have some expertise in is in urban management. And those are areas where we can share our experience, and it's mutually productive. So they are coming. We are one of the world leaders in water technology. Our leading water technology company is
intending to come over this month. You know, politicians, ministers can talk as much as we want, but at the end of the day, what matters is, do the businesses see a benefit? Do the businesses see a synergy? Is there something that can be done, not just from Singapore to Sri Lanka, but also from Sri Lanka to Singapore? And you have Singapore now at the center of ASEAN, and ASEAN next year has a vision of creating a market of 600 million people with an economy of $2.2 trillion, which is bigger than that of the Indian economy and growing 4 to 5%. So Singapore is the beating heart of ASEAN. I call it the New York of ASEAN. We have that vision. Sri Lanka has the potential to tap into that, and ideally placed in the Indian Ocean between three large economies, China, India, and ASEAN. So there's tremendous potential. The business people see it. It is for us to try and make it work. And at the same time, politically, I would say the relationships are excellent.
Endorse that unreservedly. What Minister Shanmugam said about former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew is borne out by the fact that in the old days, when travel was by ship, Lee Kuan Yew used to spend a couple of days at the Golf Face Hotel on his way to Southampton. So he was familiar with the country, and he has made references to our country in his many publications, including the last one, which was published on his 90th birthday. It's titled One Man's View of the World. One Man's View of the World. It contains some very insightful reflections on issues which are of considerable interest to Sri Lanka. The historical context has already been commented on. As far as contemporary issues are concerned, the political relationship, I would say, is excellent. It couldn't be better. And the challenge, as Minister Shanmugam said, is to make use of the economic opportunities that are now available in abundant measure. As the minister said, high-level visits by politicians are very useful. They open doors. But then the substance lies in the relationships that are established and developed by the business communities. We have considerable interest on the part of Singaporean entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka. Mustafa is doing something very exciting here. They are coming here to build a hotel that would cater for groups of tourists and others whose requirements have not really been fully met. Then at the top end of the scale, we have Shangri-La coming in here. Actually, Shangri-La are building 2 hotels in Sri Lanka. One in the capital city, that's a very large hotel, 650 rooms, and another hotel in Hambantota. We have links in other areas as well. One is defense. Defense cooperation is excellent, and every year we attend what's called the Shangri-La Dialogue, which is held in Singapore. This year, I think it is from the 1st to the 3rd of June, the Secretary to the Ministry of Defense and Urban Development, Mr. Godavi Rajapaksa, and I will both be attending that. We have been fascinated by the Singapore Air Show. That is truly magnificent. It is our intention by 2020 to expand the volume of business between our 2 countries to the threshold of $20 billion US. That's an ambitious target, but by no means impractical. So this is a multifaceted relationship. We have robust relations between Singaporean business people and our chambers of commerce. We have Mr. Asoka Hettegoda present here. He was recently the chairman of the National Chamber of Commerce in Sri Lanka, Mr. Jayanta Dharmadasa, who is Singapore's honorary consul here, is himself a leading entrepreneur, particularly in the hospital, the health sector. Incidentally, the Singapore International Foundation has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the University of Colombo and the Ministry of Health to upgrade health education facilities in medical training in our country. The minister referred to Singapore's expertise in water management. That is certainly something that we would like to benefit from. And I would like to mention one other area, that is the public service. The Singaporean public service is admired by everybody for its efficiency, for its sensitivity to current needs. And that again is an area in which we would like to collaborate very closely and intensively with Singapore. So all in all, it's a rich and full relationship, and we are determined to expand its contours still further, placing the emphasis very much on the economic aspect, by which I mean trade, investment, and tourism.
Thank you.